I never thought I'd question my marriage. Not once in 7 years. Jason was the kind of man people said was too good to be true, and for the longest time, I believed he actually was. We met in college, me, a design major with ink on my sleeves and daydreams in my head, and him, already wearing pressed shirts and talking about stock options. Somehow it worked. He brought stability. I brought color. He laughed at my jokes. I listened to his long-winded rants about productivity. We clicked. We always had. Now we're in our early 30s, living in a quiet house on Willow Lane, where we've planted hydrangeas out front and memories inside. Most nights are uneventful. He gets home a bit late. I heat up dinner. We eat together in comfortable silence, or talk about his day at the firm and my freelance projects. It isn't exciting, but it's real. And real had always been enough until it wasn't. I noticed the change before I could name it. Jason started coming home later than usual, claiming strategy meetings that conveniently weren't on any official calendar. His phone lived in his hand like it was an extension of him, and his once effortless smile now felt like a switch he had to remember to flip. Still, I didn't panic. Relationships go through phases, right? Maybe we were in one of those lulls where connection fades into routine. We weren't arguing, weren't fighting. We still kissed goodbye in the morning and fell asleep shoulder to shoulder. The distance between us wasn't loud, it was subtle, like the sound of a faucet dripping behind closed doors. Then came that night. It was a Thursday. Cool breeze, wine in our glasses, the kind of evening that's supposed to feel intimate, safe. I wore his favorite sweater, gray with slightly frayed cuffs, and he had that look, the one he gets when he wants to talk, but isn't sure how to begin. He said, his voice low, careful. Can I ask you something without you freaking out? That sentence alone should have been a red flag, but I smiled, trying to keep things light. You're not dying, are you? He didn't laugh. What is it? He set down his glass, laced his fingers, and stared at the coffee table like it might answer for him. I've been thinking a lot about us, about what we want, and I wonder if we've outgrown what this marriage was built on. I blinked. Outgrown? We love each other, yes, but maybe love isn't always about possession. Maybe it's about freedom too, growth. I stared at him, trying to follow the path of his words, but it was like chasing smoke. I don't understand. He exhaled slowly, still not looking at me. How would you feel about opening our marriage? Silence. The words landed like a punch to the chest, not painful at first, just shocking. Then the ache bloomed. I thought he was joking. I waited for a grin, a smirk, anything. But he was serious. Dead serious. I forced a breath. You're asking me if you can sleep with other people? Not just me. He added quickly, almost rehearsed. You too, if you wanted. It's not about cheating. It's about honesty, evolution, a modern kind of love. The room began to spin. I looked at this man, my husband, my safe place, and felt something inside me begin to slip. This wasn't just a question, it was a confession. And maybe, beneath all his careful words, a decision had already been made. Is there someone else? I asked, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. He hesitated, and in that pause, I felt my world fracture. No, he said finally, but the word hung hollow in the air between us. I wanted to scream, to cry, to walk out and never look back. But instead, I just sat there, frozen, my heart racing, my mind chasing shadows. Because something told me deep in my gut that this wasn't just a question out of nowhere. That he hadn't come to this idea alone. That maybe the marriage I thought I was in had already changed while I wasn't looking. And what he said next didn't just confirm it. It unraveled everything. I didn't sleep that night. Jason went to bed like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just detonated a bomb in the middle of our marriage. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of it all. My husband had asked me to open our marriage as if that was a casual, reasonable conversation starter. As if 7 years of loyalty, trust, and shared history could be twisted into some modern experiment. The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror, brushing my hair, but I didn't recognize the woman staring back. There was a tiredness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. A crack in her confidence. I thought about confronting him again, demanding to know the real reason, but I knew Jason well. If he'd already spun his logic into a noble-sounding idea about freedom and growth, he wasn't going to admit it was rooted in something much messier, boredom, or maybe betrayal. By lunchtime, I needed an anchor. I texted Lena. Coffee later. Need to talk. She replied instantly. Of course. Meet at Brew & Co. in 20. Lena had been my closest friend for over a decade. We'd weathered breakups, college stress, job changes, and late-night heartbreaks. She was the one person who could usually make sense of things when I couldn't. I arrived early. Lena showed up in her usual effortless style, messy bun, oversized sunglasses, and confidence that filled the room before she did. She kissed my cheek, ordered her usual, and slid into the seat across from me. You look like hell, she said gently. What's going on? I didn't ease into it. I couldn't. Jason wants to open the marriage? Her mouth fell open. Wait, what? He asked me last night. Said he's been thinking about it for a while. Lena stared at me for a long second, stunned. Then she leaned in. Are you serious? Jason? I nodded. And what did you say? I didn't, I couldn't, I just sat there. Lena shook her head slowly. Wow, I never would have guessed. I watched her face, trying to read between the lines. Her shock looked real, but I couldn't help wondering, had she known? He mentioned you, I said carefully. Her brow furrowed. Me. Said, we talk about this kind of thing, that you're open-minded, that maybe I'd understand. Lena leaned back, arms crossed, eyes narrowing. Let me be crystal clear, I've never had that kind of conversation with him. And if he's using me to justify his little fantasy, that's not okay. I didn't want to believe Jason would use my best friend as cover. But the seed was planted, and it wouldn't stop growing. Lena looked genuinely furious. What did he expect? That you'd just say yes? That this would bring you closer? I don't think he expected anything. I think he hoped I'd be the kind of wife who'd agree, so he wouldn't have to feel like the bad guy. I stirred my coffee, though I hadn't taken a sip. Do you think there's someone else? Lena hesitated. Just for a second, but I caught it. I don't know, she said slowly. But if there is, I swear it's not me. You know that, right? I nodded, but inside, I wasn't so sure of anything anymore. Jason had always liked Lena's energy. He said she reminded him of the way I used to be, bold, spontaneous, unfiltered. I'd laughed at that once. Now it felt like a comparison I'd failed to live up to. That night, Jason came home with takeout and a nervous smile. I sat across from him picking at my food, while he tried to fill the silence with light chatter. He mentioned a new client, a funny story from the office, a weekend plan to get away together and talk things out. I watched him calm and calculated, and realized he truly believed this was a conversation we could have and survive. That he could ask me to open our marriage and I'd sit there, hurt but reasonable, willing to negotiate the terms of my own heartbreak. But I wasn't that woman. I smiled once, out of habit more than warmth, and said I'd think about it. Because now I needed answers, real ones. And if he wasn't going to give them to me, I'd have to find them myself. Jason thought I was considering it. For the next few days, he acted lighter, more relaxed, like he believed the worst was behind us. He poured my coffee in the morning, kissed my cheek before work, even suggested we take a trip to reconnect. But all I saw in his gestures was guilt polished into performance. I didn't confront him, not yet. I needed to understand what I was really dealing with. I began watching him the way you watch a stranger. Subtle things emerged: his tendency to check his phone in the bathroom, the shift in his voice when certain names came up, the calculated warmth in moments that once felt effortless. The man I once knew wasn't gone, but he had become someone else, someone capable of hiding things behind half-truths and hopeful silence. I met with a lawyer on a rainy Wednesday, not because I had decided to leave, but because I needed to know I could. There's something terrifying about love that depends on blind trust. I wanted options, real ones, and knowing I had them gave me back a sliver of power. At home, I started moving differently, not in anger, not in rebellion, but in awareness. I listened more than I spoke. I paid attention to how Jason talked, how often he avoided eye contact when I brought up the past, how he never mentioned the idea of the open marriage again, as if my silence meant quiet acceptance. He didn't know it meant quiet strategy. One evening, I opened his laptop while he was in the shower. I wasn't proud of it, but trust wasn't something I owed anymore. It was something he'd already spent. The screen was unlocked. I opened his email, half hoping I'd find nothing. Instead, I found a folder marked archive with a series of messages that made my stomach turn. They weren't graphic. No photos, just flirtatious, suggestive emails with someone named Alyssa, a woman he'd met at a networking event 2 months earlier. Nothing explicitly physical, but emotionally. Absolutely. They'd talked about connection, about how timing is everything, about how she understood him in a way most people didn't. There was a particular sentence that hit me like a blow. Greater than my wife is amazing, but I feel like we've stopped growing. I think we both deserve more freedom. He'd already begun writing the story of our ending. Without me. I closed the laptop, hands shaking but mind clear. There was no longer a question of if something had happened. It was a question of how much I was willing to tolerate. And I knew the answer. The next morning, I stood in the kitchen folding laundry when he walked in, fresh from a run, smiling, like nothing had changed. Thinking about that cabin trip, he asked. Could be good for us. I folded a shirt, looked up and smiled softly. I've been thinking about a lot of things, actually. He raised an eyebrow. Yeah. I nodded. You wanted honesty, right? Growth, freedom. He blinked, cautious. I mean, yeah. If it's mutual? It is, I said. And I think you're right. We've outgrown what we were. But not in the way you think. Jason looked uneasy. What does that mean? It means I'm not interested in opening our marriage, I said calmly. But I am interested in closing this chapter. Silence. The longest he'd ever given me. You're leaving me, he finally said, stunned. I didn't yell, didn't cry. I just looked at him like someone seeing clearly for the first time. I'm not leaving, I'm letting go. There's a difference. He stared at me confused, as if he hadn't expected this outcome. As if the idea of me choosing me had never crossed his mind. He took a step forward. Emily, wait. That's not what I meant when I I know what you meant, I said. I've known for a while. I just needed to decide whether I was willing to shrink myself to fit your version of love. And I'm not. He stood there, silent, as I picked up the folded laundry and walked past him. I didn't slam the door. I didn't scream. Just started packing my dignity, my clarity, my new beginning. And as I closed the bedroom door behind me, one thought stayed steady. He asked for freedom. I gave him exactly that.